Hey, what's going on, everybody? Fireman AF here. I am bringing an updated video on how to use ENB. Maybe I should call it tips and tricks or something like that, because I know I have a video already that kind of shows you how to adjust ENB. But the thing is a lot of changes have happened over the last few weeks with ENB, with Boris updating them quite regularly, the binaries, and then I've been trying to keep up with it with my NVT and Re-Engaged ENB. So this is going to be a video on how to adjust, how to use, what the new effects are, and everything like that for my NVT and re-engaged EMB. I know I get asked a lot of questions like, "Hey, how do I adjust this? What does this do? How can I get some FPS back?" and everything like that. So I do want to go over that stuff with you. I will do it actually in game. I will bring up the EMB menu and I will go over everything and explain what the menu is like and how to navigate that menu and how to adjust things. Of course, because when I create my ENB and do the updates, I can only go off of what I see on my monitor. Obviously, things on your end will be a little bit differently based on your monitor. But that's the great thing about ENBs and everything is the customizing of them. You can adjust them a little bit to your style, your preference. Obviously, because there's no way that I can make an ENB that will probably please everybody. This is not going to happen because I know everybody has their tastes and their preferences when it comes to ENBs, and there's many good ENBs out there right now for special ed edition and older for sure. So what I'll do, we'll go in game. I will go over this stuff with you. But first, actually, let me apologize for the audio quality. I know it's not going to be that great because I don't normally make videos like this. So I'm kind of just using a headset with a microphone plugged into my computer to try to record this and go over this for you. I do also apologize for the length. Some may find that it's too long or too much information. But again, this is for those really focus on those that are completely new, have no idea about ENB, how to adjust things, or maybe you just need a refresher, or just my setup for my ENB is a little bit different than most ENBs because I have custom shaders that I use. So some may not be familiar with that. So I just want to make sure I cover everything to help answer those questions that I've been getting asked quite a bit. So let's go ahead, get into game, and bring up the menu. All right, hey, what's going on, everyone? So we are now in game, and I'm going to go over the ENB stuff with you in game. So first thing, we need to bring up the ENB menu, and by doing that, we're going to hit Shift and F12. We'll bring up the menu. Let me just say real quick, just a tip for those that are using a keyboard and mouse, not a controller. When you're moving the cursor around on the screen, you'll notice that your camera moves. If you don't want that to happen when trying to adjust the ENB menu, just hit the key right above the left tab to bring up the console, and it will freeze everything, and you can go ahead and adjust your ENB settings and won't be moving around. So let's go ahead and start with just some of the main things over here on the left side of the ENB menu. I won't go over in detail about all these other things down here. There's really no need to. I want to show the main adjusting for what most users are going to need, which is over on this side. But real quick, some have asked, well, what's the difference between like apply, change, load, and save? Apply will apply certain settings of the ENB. Some settings, when you mess with them, like if you're down here, for example, like SSAO, I know, like if you uncheck use indirect lighting, because I used indirect lighting, if you uncheck it and then hit save, it doesn't actually affect anything until you hit apply. It refreshes the binaries and everything and causes it to reconfigure and will disable the indirect lighting. Most effects will show instantaneously when you make the change without hitting load or apply. But if you find that doesn't happen, hit apply, well, hit save and then hit apply, and then it'll reconfigure that for you. Load is going to load the settings that was last saved. So if you're like installing my ENB and you make some changes and you haven't hit save yet, and then you hit load, it's going to load back my changes. Now, if you make changes and hit save and then make some more changes and then hit load, it's going to go and load your last save. So that's what that is. And then a save is going to save your settings that you made any adjustments to and save them to the shader files, the INI files, so that when you exit game and come back in, it will load back in there for you. So those are what that does. You have your Vsync here. You can disable Vsync if you want. Limiter, limit the FPS. I have it automatically set to 59 when you install it, but some people like it 30. Some probably want it higher, although the game engine doesn't react very well when it is above 60 FPS. All right, let's go down to the bottom half. One thing I want to point out down here that is very important, especially when it comes to adjusting things for time of day, is you need to know the time of day that you are in. I know you can look at the clock in game, see what it is, but based on the ENB, you want to expand the stats tab here and look at the value for where you're at. So for example, here I'm at mostly day and part of it is sunset. So if you're needing to adjust the brightness or the, contrast or saturation for the time of day that you're in and want to adjust it, you need to look here where you're at, and then you can make your thing like day settings under ENB effect, and you can adjust your stuff here. And I will go over this here in a bit. So that's what that is. Use effect is basically disabling and enabling the ENB. Obviously, if you uncheck it, that's what it looks like with ENB off. Then with ENB on, Shift and F12 will also disable and enable ENB for you. So you can hit that, and it will disable and enable the ENB. The effects section is what is enabled by default when you install the ENB. These are the only things I really use. Post-processing, you never want this checked. It allows the vanilla game's brightness, gamma control, everything in. It will look something like this. If you find that everything is super bright, it's because you got this enabled. Just uncheck it, and it will go back to normal. Same thing with objects processing. It allows the control for the objects within game, and then original bloom. You don't need that enabled either because I use my own bloom for my ENB, so no reason to use that. Post pass, you want this enabled because I have my own custom post pass shader with all kinds of different effects that is used to adjust coloring and all that stuff. But you want to keep that enabled because it's going to change certain things when you disable and enable. Dithering, I use dithering within the ENB effect post pass. Adaptation, I'm not a fan of that effect, so I don't really use that. It's going to change the overall brightness and darkness level of going in and out of shadows and bright dark areas. I don't care for that effect. It's like your eyes are adjusting, like when you go into a dark room and it takes time for your eyes to adjust. That's kind of what that is. Bloom, I do use bloom. If you want to disable it, just uncheck it. Mine are very subtle. I don't increase bloom so high, but some people just don't like bloom, but you can just uncheck it and just to have it disabled. Lens, I let the weather mod handle that. Depth of field, just if you don't like it, it's the blurring in the distance or focusing it on an object. You can disable it by unchecking. And then SSAO, which is ambient occlusion, and then indirect lighting. You can disable that by unchecking it if you're not a fan of SSAO. It basically gives you the shadows where they should be. I like the effect. It is a little bit heavier on the FPS, but I think it's worth the look. So it's up to you. But again, if you want to disable enable effects, you can do that right here. Just make sure if you disable something and you want to keep it that way, you hit save so that it's, disabled or enabled, whatever you want back later. And when you install my ENB, no matter what preset you install, you can come in and turn these on yourself. All of them have the default settings for my ENB. So if you install the performance version, which has bloom, depth of field, and AO disabled, you can come in here and just quickly check it and enable it. You'll be good to go. So that is that. These other things I really don't want to go over too much because there's nothing really you need to mess with down in here unless you really want to. Like if you want to adjust window lighting for brightness of windows, you can adjust that here. Brightness of fires and the light sprites coming off the candle lights, you can adjust those here as well. Just make sure you look at the stats tab to see what time of day you're in, and you can adjust it here. Volumetric fog, like the fog, how bright and everything you want the fog, you can adjust the intensity here. Fires, I just keep it at the default setting for the most part. It kind of adjusts the brightness a little bit of fires. And then certain particles, you'll notice the smoke coming off of fire pits and stuff like that. You can adjust the brightness of those here. But I think that's really on this side that you all need to really worry about is the time of day statistics here when it comes to adjusting and then using different effects and disabling them. That's really all you need to worry about on here. So what we'll do next is we will go over the right side of the ENB menu. A lot of users are only going to be using a couple of the shaders on this side, mainly the ENB effect and the ENB effect post pass. Most are not going to mess with depth of field or bloom, mainly because depth of field, I do have multiple options of depth of field strengths in my download file that you can install. If you don't like the default one, maybe you want a stronger or even stronger one, you can install that because I do have a default, which is what you get when you install my ENB. Then you have a stronger, extreme, cinematic, a subtle, or I should say soft, and then a static depth of field. But you can adjust certain things if you really want to. If you're finding that you want maybe the far blur, which is this blur that's right about here that you can kind of see, you can adjust that far blur and bring it closer to you or further back. It's completely up to you. You can adjust like the near blur. If you want, more near blur at the bottom of the screen, you can adjust that. But it's really up to you. Most people are fine with just installing one of the presets, installing it. Really, more advanced users are going to use the depth of field shader to adjust their depth of field. I'm going to go back, hit load to bring it back to what I had. Bloom. Whoops, sorry. Bloom. I use a very subtle bloom overall, especially during the day. You might find that interiors or nights are a little bit stronger because I like the glow of fires and light sources and everything like that. But during the day, I try to minimize it because bloom really affects a lot of things like your fog and your clouds and stuff like that. If it's too strong, especially on a sunny day, it really brightens things up and cannot look good, really. But for you, if again, you can quickly just disable it if you don't like it over here. But if you want to just maybe adjust it a little bit, maybe you want it stronger, like you can adjust like in white to lower the trigger point for brighter areas to get more bloom, more glow. But again, you have to be very careful because it may look, if I put this down here, to me, this doesn't look too bad here at this level. But if I go to an area where there's snow or fog, it is going to be super bright and it's not going to look good. So with ENB, settings are all about balance. You have to test all areas and everything like that. Same thing with out white is probably where most other settings that people are going to adjust. You can, the overall brightness. But if I max it out, it looks pretty good right here. But if I go to snow, it's going to be really bright. So you kind of have to find that right balance. Lens and adaptation we don't use. Again, these two right here are what most users are going to be looking at when it comes to adjusting the ENB to their preference. The ENB effect shader and the ENB effect postpass shader. Both these have been slightly adjusted to my style. Like I broke down this ENB effect based on time of day, so it's easier to see. Again, you want the stats tab over here to see exactly where you're at for time of day on the adjustments. So let's go over this ENB effect shader first. Up here at the technique, it's going to tell you what preset that you have installed. For right now, I'm using NVT Obsidian in this right now. So if you forget, like, hey, what preset do I have installed? Or, hey, this doesn't look right. Like, let's say maybe you switch to Vivid Weathers, and you forgot to install the Vivid Weathers preset, and you see it's NVT Obsidian. Maybe that's why it doesn't look exactly right, but you can tell which one you're using. These night interior adjusters, I'll actually explain this here in a little bit when we go to nighttime. Apply game color correction. This is for Nighteye, everything like that, because by default, ENB does not won't let Nighteye work because ENB overrides what is called image spaces. And Nighteye is an image space which adjusts the brightness, everything like that. So when you hit this, it allows it through. But with that said, my ENB is not tuned for apply game color correction. It does look better at night, which is when most likely you're going to use Nighteye, but use this at your discretion. Again, it's not tuned for it because it doesn't balance out right, and it's really hard to adjust the settings for me without taking away what I wanted for like NVT and Re-Engaged. Now, these are what mostly you guys are going to be looking to adjust. So a lot of times users will be like, oh, how do I make this brighter, like day brighter or darker, or I want to adjust the contrast or the colors. You can adjust it right here. It's broken down by dawn, sunrise, day, sunset, dusk, and night and interiors. So right now you can see that we're almost pretty much in daytime based on this. So when I adjust day settings, that's what's going to be impacted. So let's say I want to make like days really bright. You'll come down here and you can adjust it and adjust your brightness. You can adjust like your contrast, your saturation. You want it more colorful or whatever. You can adjust those settings right there. Oh, I just hit load. If you guys find that this happens when you hit load config, sometimes the shader like disappear. All it did is actually scroll way down to the bottom, and you can click right above it and then drag it back up. There they are. So you can adjust those things there. Again, just be careful when you're adjusting settings because in one area it may be okay or in one weather, but if you go to a different area or get a different weather, things can get very bright or off or whatever. So ENB is a very fine-tuned balance. You have to test all situations. So again, it may look fine right here, but if I go to another area and those settings aren't balanced out right, it could look off. But again, you have to make sure you're looking at the time of day for the adjustment that you want to make. Obviously, if it's daytime and I'm sitting here trying to adjust nights, I'm like, why is it not working? It's because you're in the wrong section of the ENB effects file. So that's why that stats tab is really, really important. All right, let's go over the ENB effects post-pass. So this is a custom shader. Looping helps me out with this because earlier versions of my ENB was actually ENB and reshade. Well, he helped me integrate certain reshade effects into my ENB so people didn't have to run two binaries, one for reshade, one for ENB, which causes a lot of issues for some. So they're actually integrated right here. And that's why it's important that you have the post-pass checked over here. But you can adjust things like your sharpening. So if you want to adjust sharpening amount, you can adjust that right here. I know sharpening can be impacted by resolution. So this setting may look okay for me at 1440p, but at 1080p, you might want to lower it or increase it depending on what you like. Vignette, I have it disabled by default, but you can enable the effect right here. Grain is disabled. Letterbox, some people really like letterbox effects. It's disabled by default because most people do not, and I don't want people like, hey, how do I disable this? It's off by default, but you can come in here and enable it if you'd like that, I guess, cinematic look or whatever when playing your game. But just check that. It will be enabled. All right, so these right here from dither down, again, are the main reshade effects. Most people are going to mess with Technicolor and DPX. That's where most people are going to adjust the colors a little bit or whatever, just to suit them. Maybe it looks off on their monitor, but you can adjust them here. So like Technicolor here, you can adjust like your red, green, and blue balance strength, and you can adjust it. So like, let's say I think things are too red, I can lower the red strength and adjust it, you know? But again, you have to really test things out. So in this situation, in this weather, in this area, this may look really good right here by lowering the red. But if you go somewhere else and load a different weather, you may find that now it looks way off. Now you're making the image too red or purple or green, blue, whatever, because you're moving certain amount of color in the balance. You have to make sure that you test them out and balance it out. And the same thing would be under DPX. You can adjust like your saturation to get some balance there. And same thing with your red, green, and blue. And for DPX, actually, if you go backwards, it increases. Like if I want to lower this value, it's going to add in more red because it loses the center point for that color. But again, you have to balance those settings out and be very careful when it comes to adjusting. ENB's all about balancing out those settings and making sure everything is good. It did it again for me. See, can I get it to do it for me? There we go. So that's pretty much it for the ENB effect post-pass. Again, it will show you up here what preset you have installed. In this case, again, NVT Obsidian. Contrast, you can adjust your overall contrast right here. And then this effect here adjusts like the white point balance. It will make things brighter as you lower this value here. You have to be very careful with this one too because it can affect like things like in your clouds, fog, that. So you have to test here, then go maybe to a snowy area and see if it made things brighter over there. So I think that's really about it for covering the main things to adjust things. One other thing I do want to go over with you is about making like nights and interiors darker, brighter. I do get hit up about that quite a bit. Hey, how can I make my nights brighter or darker? So let me go ahead and go to a nighttime here. I'll just wait until you see the stats tab over here start to go to 100% night. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so I am in nighttime here. So some people, like I said, want to make things brighter for nights or darker. And I have these two features right here for easy adjustment of night and interiors. So what you can do is if you want to try to just make it brighter, you can adjust this setting here for one-click adjustment. So if you, right here, 1 is default. If I go to 1.5, it makes it a little bit darker. And if I go down, it's going to make it brighter. You know, so you just kind of have to see what you want, what your preference is, and all that stuff. And the same would apply right here for interiors. Now, you could go down here to the night section and adjust your overall brightness, your contrast, your saturation, all that stuff to your balance. But for some users, that's just way too difficult, and they don't want to deal with that. And they find that this mode up here kind of washes out things too much. And they just want something that's more permanent and that will last for them for when they're playing the game. So again, adaptation min would actually work really good in this situation. You can actually lower this to make it a little bit brighter, you know, to your preference and go from there. But again, it may look good in this weather. Usually you'll find that clearer weathers are actually darker versus cloudy, stormy weathers, which will tend to be brighter weathers. and it's really up to you. I don't even remember what my setting was on this. I just messed this up. But I can adjust it back. So that's really about it on the settings and everything. I hope I answered most of the questions for you guys in the ENB menu and all that stuff. One other thing I'm going to go over now is how to adjust SSAO resolution to get FPS back, because some people have noticed in recent versions that they lost a lot of FPS because of the SSAO. I'm going to show you what you can adjust real quick on that outside of game. You have to be out there, and that will be the last thing I cover. All right, let's go. Okay, so real quick, last thing I'm going to go over is how to get some FPS back with that SSAO setting that I did change in recent versions. I increased the resolution setting for the SSAO to help with like pixelation on NPC skins and everything like that. I've been told that it actually helped. For most people, it seemed like it helped me. Uh, Maybe it really doesn't, but it feels like it did. It looks like it did. But if you want to get some FPS back and you want to try this, let's go ahead and do this adjustment. So you're going to bring up where you installed your ENB, and you're going to bring up the ENB series config file, not the folder, but the config file. And one on my other monitor. You're going to scroll down to SSAO. Sorry, there we go. So under the SSAO, SSIL setting, all you're going to do is go down here to these lines right here, the resolution scale and source texture scale. And you can go ahead and change that back to the default setting of 0.5. Hit save, and you can close this file out, and you will be good. You should get an FPS jump back, maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 FPS back. But you'll probably notice a little bit of difference in the quality of the SSAO. I mean, and if you really want to push this and you don't care about FPS, you can actually go up to 1.0 on this and have it looking really good too. So it's completely up to you. But again, I just wanted to go over that with you guys because some people have been asking about how to get some FPS back with the SSAO. So that's how you do that. So there you go. I think I covered everything for you guys. I hope I answered all those questions and showed you something new. Again, apologize for the length of the video because I did go over a lot of stuff. If you have any questions, hit me up in game. Thank you guys so much for all the support that you have given me for my NVT and Re-Engaged ENB, especially the patience with all the updating as I'm trying, especially with NVT. I'm trying to perfect that ENB a little bit more, trying to get it to what I really want. And with all the new effects coming out on ENB, it is becoming a little bit easier. So again, I appreciate it. Thank you guys. You all have a great day.